Welcome to the Revolution Church podcast. Before we begin, we'd like to remind you that our ministry is supported 100% by listeners like you. To make your 100% tax-deductible donation today, please visit revolutionchurch.com/donate. You can also learn more by clicking the donate section on the website.
All right, everybody. Welcome to Revolution. Thanks for making it out. See a couple new faces, and always nice to have new folks. Once again, if we could just get everybody to come at once, we're going to have a no-skip day. No-skip church day. So we can... I feel like we have like people who we go in shifts every other week. Because where's Bob? Where's Bob today? So, this Bible that I have, once I put on my stand, sinks the stand, so I'm going to move that over there. Thanks for listening, everybody, online, as always. We are glad to have you here, or be there, wherever you're at. This week has flown by. My son, I don't know if I keep talking about this, and I might because I'm just fatigued, because he's got a big boy bed now, which is just a normal bed. He's out of his crib. So he keeps getting up at like 5 or 5:30, maybe 6 latest, and just walks into our room. And we're like, buddy, it's time for bed. And he's like, no. And he just... Praise God you have children. Wonderful children. Man, people who don't have children and sleep in, you have no idea how good you have it. Like, I wish I could go back in time and just talk to myself. Just be like, enjoy it more. I feel guilty sometimes. I'd be like, oh, I slept in too long. I feel bad. I like to be like, don't feel bad. You'll make up for it. The first 2 years of your child's life, you will make up for it. And my 4-month-old is got a stuffy nose, and so it sounds like the Tasmanian devil is sleeping in our room. So I was like, they're going to have a pig or something in our room. So, man, that's my life. That and waking up to a little thing called depression. Always fun. Today I was getting out of the car, just feeling okay, and then all of a sudden just a little bit of depression comes over. I was like, oh, really? Come on, depression, not Sunday. You can have other days of the week. But I can't give you Sunday. And, it's a real pain in the butt sometimes. But you know, it is what it is, and I just share that not because it's like, oh, poor me, I want everybody to be sad. It's kind of a typical day in the life of Jay, and I like to share that with people because I think we all go through our own garbage, right? So, and also I had something planned to talk about before service, and I was like, and I can't remember what it is, so I'm going to keep babbling and telling you stories until I remember what it is. I think we are going to not have service on the 5th. I will make sure that you all know that's when time changes, but I haven't cleared it with the bowling alley yet. Because I'm going to be out of town, and I'm going to be out of town 2 weeks in a row, but we have a guest speaker for the second week, but it's kind of hard to find like a bunch of guest speakers. In November, for some reason, I've gotten speaking engagements, which is rare. Nice to work. I'm going on a thing called Loosen the Bible Belt Tour. And we're going through the South. And it's me, 2 comedians, and a ukulele player. And I'm the only Christian on the thing, so it's like pretty fun. You know, one of my other friends, she's Kristen, who put the thing together. She's a lesbian, and she tells dirty lesbian jokes. And it's quite interesting, but she asked me to do it, and we did it the first year, and it was great. We did it the second year, and it was a lot of fun. And so I said, I'll do it a third year. It's really different, but it's trying to get people to realize that you don't have to be on the same page for everything in order to work together or be friends, and maybe open up dialogue, because it's kind of this unconditional, we're not asking each other to change, thing, and that we're equal opportunist offenders in some ways. Because if you came for the comedians, you're probably offended by the preacher. If you came for the preacher, you're probably offended by the comedians, especially the ukulele player. And so we're doing that, and I'm really excited about getting on the road for a week. I hate being away from my kids. That's the only thing, but it'll be good. And that is, I'm going to just get the dates, pull those dates up, and drop that here. November 4th through the 11th, and it's Loosen the Bible Belt. And you can go to LTBB-tour on Instagram and get more information, or you can find also Loosen the Bible Belt on Facebook. So yeah, check that out if you get a chance. Pretty excited about it. And I'm also going to go speak at Open Door Community Church, which is the church that really challenged me to become a affirming LGBTQ affirming pastor. And that was the church that really pushed me to come out of my comfort zone and take that stand. And I've been going there for, maybe 10, 11 years now, maybe longer. I didn't realize that until I opened up my Facebook today, and it was like memories. Those memories things? And it was like 8 years ago, and it was a picture of me there. I was like, oh my gosh. I think this year will be the first year where I have so much gray in my beard. I turned 41, and just the gray just went. Now, if I show up here and there's not gray in my beard, don't say anything. It's just for men. Just a secret. A miracle may happen. I don't know. Depends on how vain I really am. Last week we talked about sin and all that stuff, sin talk, and I mentioned that we might talk a little bit about the Jesus and the money changers, and so that's what we're going to do. It's not usually a sermon or a verse that I use in sermons. I remember I've had friends who've told me that they don't believe that the verse belongs in the Bible. They don't like it. But I have verses that I don't think belong in the Bible either. So, what are you going to do? They're like, I just don't believe Jesus got angry. And I'm like, okay. So all those things he said to the Pharisees, he was just being cool, calm, collective. Yeah, so let's read this and get into it. Matthew 21, 12 and 13. Then Jesus entered the temple and drove out all who were selling and buying in the temple. And he overturned the tables and the money changers and the seats of those who sold doves. He said to them, "It is written, my house shall be called a house of prayer, but you are making it a den of robbers." Now, there's reason why Jesus did this and what was going on. The money changers were changing money into temple money, which is kind of like going to Disneyland and getting Disney bucks. You're not going to really have any other place to use those. And there was a big upcharge, and often they would also say that the sacrificial doves and things like that bought at the temple were somehow more holy than other things. And, doing what religion does sometimes and scams people out of their money in the name of holiness and things like that. And this is something that Jesus was extremely upset about. Now, I'm not getting into that just so we can talk about the history behind it. I'll just give a little history behind it. But what I wanted to talk about is that being nice isn't always going to change things. And that's tough. Because, you go, oh, Jesus is love, and love your neighbor, and love your enemies, and you can't, and you get all that way, and I'm a grace guy, so I'm like, peace. But there's times where Jesus was not always nice, and there's times where he had to be confrontational. Now, the funny thing is that there probably, when it says tables and chairs, I don't think there were tables and chairs at that time. There were probably blankets laid out on the ground, and so Jesus was probably reaching down, grabbing cloths and blankets and stuff. But if you watch the Passion of Christ, you'll know that Jesus invented the table. Did you see the Passion of Christ, anybody? Okay, well, it's kind of hilarious. I mean, it's not hilarious at all. It's really violent and disgusting and gross. One scene where Jesus is a carpenter, and he builds a table, and he sits down, and he shows his mother, and he's like, look, a table. This is what I call a table. I was like, he just keeps on creating. Can't stop him. But I thought it was funny that they were Mel Gibson was giving Jesus the cred for inventing the table. And I don't know if they had chairs before then or not. I'm not sure. But, in other ones it talks about that he made a whip out of rope. And did that. But the idea is that nice isn't always going to change things. And the question here is, can grace and love confront? Jesus can. So it would seem to make sense that grace and love can confront. And that's coming back to Jesus and the religious leaders. Jesus called the religious leaders brood of vipers. Said you crossed land and sea to make one convert and turn them into twice the sons of hell that you are. Said some things about whitewashed tombs and different things like that were kind of pretty harsh to his critics. And you would go, well, is he loving his neighbor as himself? Well, I have to believe that Jesus practiced what he taught. So I have to believe that in some way that this was his way of showing some sort of mercy, love, and grace by saying, I've got to expose you to what you are by telling you the truth and telling you the truth firmly. Or maybe, the people around you will see it. This is important because if you think about the time that we're in a time where we need to be honest, and we need to be, nonviolence even. Nonviolence confronts an evil, and it's a part of being confrontational. The nonviolent movement that Gandhi started and Martin Luther King also used. I've been a part of groups where we use nonviolence, but it's still confrontational. We still would go to places, and if they wouldn't meet with us, we'd set up another meeting and say, well, they won't meet with us. It was exposing a tension that was already there. We weren't creators of tension. That's what Dr. King said, is we're not creators of tension, but we're exposing a tension that already exists. And so that's what Jesus is doing here, is he's exposing a tension that exists already, an injustice that is there. And that's what happens in Reformation, when we've got to change the church. And we have to speak truth. And it's a fine line. It really is a fine line. Now, why I think Reformation is important. I was talking to a friend the other day, and we were talking about Reformation and how a lot of the church is dying, and how a lot of people are kind of happy with just saying, let the church die, let's kill it off, it's done. And I don't know if they hope for church resurrection or something like that. I don't know how spiritual it gets. But I guess there's a part of me that really hopes more for a reformation, a change in the church, that the church can become something better. Right now, how do I feel about the church? Well, I pastor a very small church, so I don't know exactly the pulse of everything that's happening in the church right now, but I really do hope that more people will come around to being affirming and loving and open and caring. And the resurgence of the conservative evangelical that we see right now is really nerve-wracking. And how do we speak truth to that power? How do we speak truth to the power of President of the United States when he's saying a lot of things that are the opposite of what the good news is? That's what we're called to. And when the church is standing behind him and saying, yes, a lot of church people are saying, we agree, the person's called of God, I think it's stretching it anytime we say a president's called of God when we're saying that someone who has to make decisions on blowing up people. It's a little bit, tough. People will maybe take that Roman scripture literally where it says God points those in leadership, but I have a hard time with that one. So how do we change a church and not kill it? How are we able to be confrontational but not devastating? Matthew 10. I think Matthew is before Revelation. So let me turn back. My dyslexia kicks in sometimes. I'm like, Acts, Galatians, Revelation. Oh, Matthew. We're still in Matthew. I'm going to jump back to Matthew 10. Matthew 10:16. This is when Jesus is sending out disciples. He goes, look, I'm sending you out as sheep among wolves. Be as weary as a snake and harmless as a dove. Now I want to read a different translation because I don't think that one is good enough. And this one might not either, because I'll use a translation. I'll use that quote in a second that I really like. Where are you? See, I'm sending you out like sheep into the midst of wolves, so be wise as a serpent and innocent as a dove. Wise as a serpent and innocent as a dove. Just to mention Dr. King one more time, in I think it's called The Strength to Love or The Courage to Love, one of his books, which is a collection of his sermons. He has a whole sermon on that one verse that is amazing. I'm always shocked when I read pastors who do one verse sermons and just go pow, 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 pow. I love that. I wish I had that gift. Maybe one day I'll hunker down. But when you have kids, you're lucky if you get a sermon at all. It's like a small miracle. But be wise as a serpent and harmless as a dove. And it seems that this is saying we want to be wise as a serpent, harmless as a dove. And wisdom versus foolishness or ignorance. Knowing when and whom to confront. It's having discernment. It's realizing that we are called to be, as Dr. King put it, hard-minded. To be ones that aren't soft-minded people who are turned to and fro, who buy into whatever the new thing is or whatever religion says we should do, but that we make questions, that we are able to have questions, that we're able to stand up for what we believe in. He said a lot of the thing that was with segregation is that a lot of people who seemed soft-minded were preyed upon by, others who were in power or had control, and politicians, and just told, this is what we've got to do. You've got to go along with this. And they just went along with it. And he's saying we're called to be wise as a serpent, and that's to be tough-minded. That's to have discernment. That's to ask questions. That's sometimes to turn over tables. But we're also to be harmless as a dove, which is a beautiful way of looking at what you would see as nonviolence. It's confrontational without violence, confrontational without hurting others. Doesn't mean you don't hurt feelings, because in this world, in this life, it's impossible to do. But it means you don't destroy the person. And last week, this verse was brought up, and I want to share this because I think it's important and it goes along with what we're saying. It's about the prophecy of Jesus. It's in Matthew 12:18. It says, I'll read the beginning. I'll read 15 so we can get a bit of context. When Jesus became aware of this, he departed. Many crowds followed him, and he cured all of them and ordered them not to make him known. This was to fulfill what he had been spoken through the prophets of Isaiah. Here is my servant whom I have chosen, my beloved, with whom my soul is well pleased. I will put my spirit upon him, and I will proclaim justice to the Gentiles. He will not wrangle or cry aloud. Nor will anyone hear his voice in the streets. He will not break a bruised reed or quench a smoldering wick, until he brings justice and victory to all in his name, and the Gentiles will hope. And in plain English, don't you love this? It's fun, just reading it over and over again. I just want to read it in the New Living because it gets just a little bit clearer, pushes it through. Look at my servant whom I have chosen. He is my beloved, and I'm very pleased with him. I will put my spirit upon him, and he will proclaim justice to the nations. He will not fight or shout. He will not raise his voice in public. He will not crush those who are weak. I like that just because that's what it's saying. He will not crush those who are weak or quench the smallest of hope, until he brings the justice with his final victory, and the name will be the hope of all the world, which is when he says Gentiles. It's funny, next to this, I have old notes written. We tried waiting, guys. We tried. I have old notes written that says... cheesy alert. It says WWJD next to this. But it was because that's where I was at the time, and it was like, what would Jesus do? This is I've had this old Bible for years. I think my mom actually bought this Bible for me. She loved buying me Bibles. So I would be like during Christmas or something, I would just like, I want this type of Bible. She'd be like, oh, I'm so proud of my boy. He wants to read a Bible. He's got all the tattoos, but he loves the Bible. So there it is again, is the wise as a serpent, harmless as a dove, won't crush those who are weak, is not going to quench their smallest hopes. there's that love and that grace. There's that fine line. Jesus confronted people. Jesus loved people. Jesus healed people. Jesus rebuked people. I mean, he said, Peter, get behind me, Satan. So there was times where he knew when it was time to be straightforward, and he wasn't going to be quenching the smalls of hope, but he was going to be clear and honest. And we see that Peter didn't lose his mind. Well, Peter was kind of a weirdo. Peter had a lot of issues, and those issues did not go away, by the way. Just read Galatians and you'll know those issues didn't go away. But it's true, and he would not raise his voice in the streets. And every time I read this, I always think of street preachers who are saying, repent, turn from God, And I've even asked street preachers what they think about this. And they're like, yeah, we take everything literally, but this one. So, or they'll come up with others, or they'll come back with Jesus clearing the temple, something like that. You're like, oh, okay. But I'm trying to take all these three verses that might seem contradictory and use them, because Jesus is using even language that seems to contradict. I'm sending you out like sheep among wolves. I want you to be wise as a serpent, harmless as a dove. It's like, what does that mean? How do I do that? And he goes in and talks about how that's done. But for time's sake today, we're not going to do that. And as much as I tried to avoid Galatians because it's my favorite book, and I'm hoping at the beginning of the year to start our Galatians study, our yearly Galatians study at the beginning of the year. It's like I don't want the beginning of the year to get here because I'll be 42 on December 18th. But I do get excited about Galatians. And so I'm always like, keep Galatians out of it. But I can't, so I apologize. Galatians, also, Paul makes this clear too. He says in Galatians 5:14, for the whole law can be summed up in this one commandment, love your neighbor as yourself. But if instead of showing love amongst yourselves, you're always biting and devouring one another, watch out, beware of destroying one another. And I've seen the biting and the devouring destroy people's lives. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me, which is just BS. Words are deadly. Words are cause us all a lot of pain. Can any of you think of sometime that maybe an insult someone said, or some critique someone gave you? Maybe it was about your personality. Maybe it was about your body. Maybe it was about, I don't know, something personal. And I have one where it was like 20 years ago. And it's like funny to me that 20 years ago, and I still, every now and then, it just pops in my mind. Just one thing that someone said that was just a little bite or a little devour, and it just is like, I'm not even going to share it with you because I don't like it. It makes me uncomfortable. But I was like, oh. And it just never went anywhere. Or things that were said to you in maybe high school. Good Lord. And it just sticks with you. I grew up with lots of body image issues. And so there was a few things that people had said, and it just never went away. Biting and devouring one another. We do it on social media like crazy. And I don't know if that's being harmless as a dove. I know there's times to confront. I know there's times that being nice isn't always going to change things. But I also know that we're not supposed to quench the smallest hopes. We're not supposed to destroy one another. but we're supposed to do change. That's what Reformation does. Where the Reformations went wrong is when the killing started and the burning started and the rioting started, when people started hurting one another, killing one another, tearing one another apart, burning each other at the stake. That's when it was like, this isn't a Reformation anymore. This is a witch hunt. This is murder. But we need Reformation. We need to change desperately. Or the church does need to die. And I have hope that the church will be able to continue on. And I think there's a lot of good churches out there. So I'm not here to say all churches are bad. I think there's a lot of great churches out there. But they need more of a voice. And they need to be heard. And we need to be open to each one another's different interpretations and different ideas and different theologies, and be able to sit down and talk. Be strong-minded, be wise as a serpent. But what does this look like? Well, what it looks like, I hope, is what these verses brought together is a fine line of a way we are called to walk. And that we will look at that next time you're on social media or you're in a situation where confrontation is called for, that you'll think about this. You'll think about being harmless as a dove, but also wise as a serpent. And you'll think about not quenching hope, or you think about not biting and devouring the other person. And man, we can bite and devour people out of the best intentions. People say something. I mean, man, especially now, I can't even get on Twitter without feeling so reactive. Like I've kind of stopped tweeting altogether because I just would be on there arguing all day. And I used to argue all day. Matter of fact, I probably got some pretty damn good sermons out of it from the arguments that I had. Sometimes those arguments would turn into phone calls. Like, I'm going to DM you my phone number. We're going to town, And my girlfriend at the time would just be like my wife, and then I went through a divorce and I started dating somebody. But both of them would say, this ruined you. It makes you so angry. And then people would be like, would you stop going on Twitter? All your sermons are about Twitter. So it's easy to get obsessed and get charged with wanting to just be right and put people in their place. And I see this especially amongst, and this is what frightens me the most and makes me most uncomfortable, is I see this type of infighting amongst liberal Christians. And I feel like liberal Christians in some ways are the hope for the church. But I see them turn on each other so easily. And I don't know if it's because of the hurt or the pain that they've been through. But when we turn on each other, we tear each other apart, or we play like, well, I'm more of a social justice warrior than you are. I'm more open than you are. I'm not going to talk to you because of this or that. We bite and devour one another. We quench the hope. We put out the burning wick. We just, the smoldering wick, we just make it not smolder anymore. And we've got to learn what it is to love one another, what it is to confront one another out of that love and that grace, what Jesus meant when he was saying brood of vipers, what Jesus meant when he went to the temple and turned over tables. What is it? Everything there's a time. I can't remember what verse that is. It's a song too. To everything turn, turn, turn. But that's from a verse. It's in Proverbs, right? And so there's a time for everything. But that comes with wisdom. Comes with discernment. And it comes with love. Because you don't want to be hard-minded without love. You don't want to be wise as a serpent, but not harmless as a dove. You don't want to be wise as a serpent and not love. Because then you're just kind of a serpent. And what does a serpent do? Just to protect itself. But it kills to protect itself. It strikes out to keep itself safe. And that's what we don't want to do. We don't want to become that reactionary. So I hope we can become peacemakers. I hope we can find ways to walk this fine line. I hope we can be Christ-like in that way. Because when I think of Christ-like, I think, give someone a cup of water, give someone some bread, give someone some clothes. But it's also being Christ-like is saying, okay, sometimes I'm going to have to stand up to the religious. Sometimes I'm going to have to say things that aren't popular. Sometimes I'm going to have to pick up my own cross. And saying, what does that require? And those are just a way of looking at it. Thanks for coming today. That's my talk. We're going to say a quick prayer. But before that, just to remind everybody, online listeners and folks here, we're a nonprofit organization. We survive through your donations. That's how the church makes it. We have a board of directors. We're nonprofits, so you can get a tax write-off if you want. Just write. If you write a check, it's easier to do that, or if you give online, it's easier to do that. And I will say to anybody listening online, if you decide to give online, leave your address too, not just your email, because I'd love to send you a letter saying thank you. I can send an email too, but I've just been really slack on sending emails, as some of you know. So I need to get back on top of that. But I would love to send you a postcard saying thank you for donating and helping us do what we do. But we do really are in a time where we desperately need your support with the holidays coming and things like that. It just gets tougher and tougher to keep this thing going. And we've got bills to pay and rent to pay and all that stuff. So I'll end with that and say a quick prayer. Lord, I thank you for your grace and mercy. I ask that you would just, give us wisdom. Help us to be peacemakers. Let us to understand timing. And your will be done. This is a difficult world, and it's really tough to understand anything and make sense out of it, any of it. So anything you can give us would be great. In Jesus' name, amen.